Right guys, welcome back. So in this video I'm going to go through tile palettes and how to kind of build levels using a tile palette. So no coding really necessary in this one, it's purely playing around with some of the built-in tools in Unity. So I'm probably going to put this in assets, to be honest. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to drag my tile set. As you can see, a really interesting tile set of just colors. So I'm just going to talk through how to cut this tile set up, because if I drag this into a scene, we can see it's all the colors together rather than being split how I want them to be. So the sprite mode is the first thing. Make sure you set this to multiple, and then we can go into the sprite editor once we've clicked apply. And what this does is it allows us to cut it up. So I'm actually going to use 32 by 32 pixels for this. I don't need to, I could use 1 by 1, but just for the sake of it, I'll talk through this. You'll notice down here, my sprite sheet's actually 80 by 80, but I'm still using 32 by 32 because there seems to be this weird bleed with Unity's tile palette where if you don't add a bit of extra around the edge, an extra bit of extra color, you can see it flickering. So I'm going to do this and show you how I'm going to do this. So the first thing to do is click and drag in here. Yeah, you get a width and a height. So obviously I'm going to set mine to 32 by 32. I'm just going to try and place it somewhat in the middle of this. And so you can see here, I'm going to set this to say grass. Next one, I'm going to go in here, drag in there, set this to 32 by 32. I was pretty close. Make sure that's central. This for me is going to be sand. Next is the blue, which you've probably guessed is water, or my kind of water in here. It could look a lot better, but for the sake of this, it works. This is my interpretation of water. So yeah, again, 32 by 32. This is just going to be dirt, a very basic tile set. But you can see if my tile does bleed slightly, it's still got the same color at the side. So I'd be careful with that with your tile sets. Make sure that you've got that extra bit of padding around the edge, or else it'll look very flickery and a little bit dodgy, if I'm honest. Unless you change lots of settings, this is the easiest way. So I'll apply that. Close that, and you'll see straight away we have them all split up and named. So that works. So the next thing we're going to do is right click, create, and tile. So this asks where to save it. Obviously we're going to save it here. I'm going to call this ti_dirt. Reason for that is I want them to all stick together. So I could just duplicate this with Control D, change the name of it with F2, and then call this one grass. Same again with the duplication, sand, and water. So we can then click on them and just drag the dirt into the sprite at the top. Same with the grass. Same with the sand, and finally with the water. Before I do anything else, I need to figure out which tiles my player can't walk on. Which ones they're going to collide with. So for me, it's going to be the dirt and the water. Yeah. So I need to select the other two, which is grass and sand, and change the collider type to none. So that there is going to be no collision on these. The player can just walk on them. Whereas these two, they'll bump into them and stop. So that's the tiles created. The next thing we need to do is go into our hierarchy, right click, 2D object, and add a tile map, which will bring us in this grid. By default, this grid's cell size is 100 by 100. So I'm going to change that to 0.32, 0.32. But as you can see, they are tiny. So yeah, again, I'm probably going to add a little bit of scale to this 5 seems about right for me at the minute, but this would all depend on the initial sprite size. So if you've done 64 by 64 or 128, it's going to be changing depending on what you've done. Make sure when you create assets for the same game to always use the same resolution, especially when doing tile sets, because that can be a nightmare. So if we open this grid up by just clicking the little arrow there, we'll get our tile map, which has these things in. We don't really need to play around with any of this. I am going to add a component though, which is a tile map collider 2D. This, as you probably guessed, means that we can add collision. That's all I'm going to do with that. I'm going to pretty much leave this alone now because I'm going to go to Window, 2D, Tile Palette, which brings us up this little menu. Obviously, we've not set a palette of these tiles up yet, so create new. I'm going to call this Environment Palette, if I can spell palette, that is. And create. I'll just save it in assets, so we've got it in here. And then it says to obviously drag tile sprite. So I'm going to click and then hold down shift and select all of them and just drag them straight into here. So this is what it's done. And this is the fun bit really, because now we get to go paintbrush, for instance. I'll start with grass, I'll start painting grass in. So it is literally as simple as this. Say for instance you go too far, you can go in, you can erase one, you can go in and drag a square out if need be. So just for the sake of this, remember right click in here and move around. But I'm just going to very quickly put together, I don't know, a little island maybe of some description. And then I'm going to go in here, switch on to dirt, because remember dirt's one of the assets that my player collides with. So if I put that around the edges there, that looks about right. I might go in and throw some sand in here. There we go. That's sand-like, I suppose. And then I could go in if I wanted to, and I could draw in all the water individually. I could even go in and make a square of water, or my preference, I will just click on the fill tool and just fill these areas with water. So this is my little island now. And if I click play, you'll see that currently you can't see my player, which is a key point here. So I'm just going to move the tile palette out of the way. I'll bring it down here. And the reason we can't see the player is because of this here, which is order in layer. So if I increase that, say 20, I'm just bringing it as high as I'm ever going to need it. You'll see that we can now see the player. So if I click play, and I have a little run around, make sure to avoid the hazards. I can move around on the grass, I can move around on the sand, I go to the dirt, I can't progress past that. I'll spin around like that, I'll show you how to fix that in a second. But yeah, I can't collide, I can't walk on water, I can't walk on dirt, I can walk on sand, and I can walk on grass. So that works. Obviously, we've got the spinning issue, which is an interesting one, because essentially all this one is if we go into constraints on the, make sure you click on player by the way, go into constraints on the rigid body 2D, we just need to freeze the rotation. Because I've used a circle, as soon as it hits something, it'll start to spin. So by doing this, I'm just making sure that I can hit into whatever I like, and now it won't spin. And the reason it was spinning and we could see it spinning was purely because we had the camera attached to it. So now you'll see we've got this, and it all seems to be working pretty well. Obviously with this tile palette you can make massive environments very quickly. I've just shown you with quite a small environment, but so far so good. We've got collection, we've got hazards, we've got a player moving around, and we've actually given them somewhere to move around on. So hopefully that video all kind of made sense. I'm going to have a think about what the next videos are, because there's a lot of potentials we could do. I like the idea of teleportation as one of the next videos. So we can set up like an old school Pokemon kind of thing where you walk into a building, it teleports you to another area in the level. That's the other building, or a different scene. There's that idea. There's shooting. There's a lot we could do in the next ones. So I'm going to have a think about that. And I'll catch you in the next one. Not quite sure what that is, but I hope that all made sense. Cheers.